From the John DeVita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network. And now, here is Jim and Rich.
Off and running with another edition of the Armchair Experts, Leon and Massaro, back like it or not. We've got so much to talk about. I don't even know where to begin.
I know where to begin.
All right, so
I
begin.
know where to begin because I'll tell you what, it is such a privilege every time I sit behind this microphone.
Oh my God, here he goes, getting smarmy again.
I'm sitting next to the voice of the Ridgewood Rebels, Jim Leon, who I've known for over 50 years.
54 years.
That this man does.
54 years.
And
do you realize
John,
that?
Every time I come down here and have the privilege of broadcasting from the DeVita Broadcast Center, and I'm sitting here looking at the Hall of Famer, John DeVita, and I'm amazed at what you've done, John. Just thank you so much. So
okay,
you know what? That
now
makes
the fact
my
that
day
right
off the bat.
All right, the fact that you had to text me last night at 9:30 to say Joe Cowley was an idiot.
Yeah, Joe. Well, here's the deal, Jim.
I
Joe Cowley is coming down on Derrick Rose because Derrick Rose is not doing enough to recruit players for the Bulls. Now, you know what? I'm not going to knock Joakim Noah for actually the whole thing starts with Joakim Noah and his recruitment of Carmelo Anthony. And I understand from Noah's point of view what he wants to do. He wants the Bulls to be the best. But to turn around and then knock Rose for not participating, I'll have to say this. I think Derrick Rose is doing the wise thing by not doing that. And there's a lot of different reasons why. First off, I don't think that Rose really is sold on Carmelo as a fit for the Bulls, and that I would concur with him, and I think that's an intelligent outlook on his part. So, but the other thing, even if he thought that Carmelo was a fit or anybody else was a fit, I think you get into some real dangerous areas when players start to recruit other players. Because in reality, say that Carmelo does come to the Bulls, that now you've created a situation for your front office, your GM, because there is a salary cap. Carmelo is going to make big money. You already have Derrick Rose with big money.
Derrick Rose is basically taking up 1/3 of your salary cap.
So now you've got a situation where you've changed the whole team dynamic. But even if you didn't have the salary cap, say that was not even a consideration. Say that you recruit Carmelo and he doesn't come. Now you may have a player, a teammate. You have the potential of having a teammate whose position he plays, who now that teammate knows, oh, wow, you recruited Carmelo, so what do you think of me? You know, in other words, you could create some bad feeling there. The other thing is, if you successfully recruited Carmelo when he came, somebody's going to lose playing time. So how do those guys or the people who are affected look at it? So I think as a player, I understand the motivation of Noah. He wants to have the best team that he can. He thinks Anthony would be a good fit. I would dispute that, but I understand where he's coming from. But I think it's not a good area to be in for a player. I think the GM and the coach are there for a reason. They make those decisions, and they also take the heat for those decisions.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not the player's place to be taking that kind of heat.
When did this suddenly become the players have to be involved in the team business?
I understand the motivation there, Jim, because in 16-inch softball we recruit all the time. Mm-hmm. So obviously, you know what? You have a few beers after a game with a guy from another team. He's a good player. Well, you say to yourself, boy, I would like to have this guy as a teammate. All of a sudden, that guy becomes your teammate, and you realize, he might be a good drinking buddy, but maybe he's not such a great teammate.
But that's about it.
Yeah.
That's about it.
So
there's a few things. In fact, it was kind of interesting too. It was kind of a couple of things that we either talked or texted about. I can't remember. Talking about some of the best case and worst case scenarios along the way with the Bulls. And I saw this on, where did I see this? It was a link, I think, off Grantland.com by Robert Mays, who was kind of their resident Bulls expert, trying to talk about what's some of the best and worst things that can be done as far as the Bulls with this Carmelo Anthony situation. And I want to talk about free agency here too, because I saw something else that I really made me think about this. As far as, what he's saying here, the best case scenario, your starting five next year is going to be Derrick Rose, Jimmy Butler, Carmelo Anthony, Joakim Noah, and Taj Gibson. Use your mid-level exception on Nikola Mirotic, and use a biannual exception. That's a new one. I haven't heard that one before. On Kirk Heinrich for DJ Augustin. Acquire Anthony in a sign-and-trade involving Carlos Boozer, a 2015 first-round draft pick, a top 10 protected 2015 first-round pick from Sacramento, and Mike Dunleavy. That would be the ideal situation.
I don't think so. I'll be honest with you.
I know the one you like.
Here's what I say.
Here's the one you don't mind.
Here's what I would like. I would like to see Pau Gasol, Nikola Mirotic, or Mirotic, however you say his name. You got Doug McDermott. You have then you have Derrick Rose back. You got Joakim Noah.
I like it.
You have Jimmy Butler. You have Taj Gibson. You keep Mike Dunleavy. You also have hopefully Kirk Heinrich and DJ Augustin back.
No, you're going to have to move some things here. Here's with your salary cap. Here would be the situation that I read this and I thought, oh, this would be perfect. You got Derrick Rose, Jimmy Butler, Mike Dunleavy, Taj Gibson, and Joakim Noah as your starting five. You acquire Paul Gasol in a sign-and-trade involving Boozer and a 2015 first-round pick. You use the mid-level exception on Mirotic. You use the biennial exception on Heinrich for Augustine. Okay, now you're back to the world of a sign-and-trade. Now,
so out of the guys I named, who would we lose?
You're going to wind up losing DJ Augustin.
No, see, I wouldn't want to see that.
Yeah, you're going to wind up losing DJ Augustin. Okay. A 34-year-old Pau Gasol is not really anything to alter this team or be earth-shaking, but this makes this team worth getting excited about. Well, because you're going to have Mirotic and Paul Gasol off the bench. You're going to have that type of front court depth that they had a couple of years ago when Gibson and Omar Asik were there every time they got on the floor. You've got Dougie McBuckets coming in now.
Okay, actually you have Pau Gasol starting, and you have Taj Gibson coming off the bench because Taj Gibson is you know what? He's the perfect Celtics type sixth man. I would say the Celtics were the guys who really made the sixth man popular. Because here's where Taj Gibson is great. Although he's not instant offense like a lot you would like to see a lot of sixth men be, he comes off the bench. If you're going good, he comes off the bench and continues the energy that you've already started out with if you're going good. If you're going bad, he comes off the bench and gives you instant energy and a shot to keep to sort of try to turn the energy of the game around. Gasol is not a guy to come off the bench. He's a starter. He's a guy that I would look at him.
Has he been starting in L.A.?
Sure, he starts in L.A.
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
yes, he did.
He's been a starter in L.A. the whole time.
I just went back and
I
thought
would
about
look
it.
at Pau Gasol as sort of a Bill Cartwright type of thing, where when Cartwright was with the Bulls, and they would start the game off, and Cartwright would take a couple of shots from the outside, and if he buried them, it would open up the inside for the slashers and cutters. And I would see Pau Gasol as being that really solid presence that Bill Cartwright sort of had for us. The other thing is, if you have Gasol, you have Mirotic, you have McDermott, you have Dunleavy, you have some offensive firepower.
You got some shooters.
Yeah, instead of... and I really think that the big thing about Carmelo, and I don't want to say anything negative about Carmelo, I don't want to say... But I would say this. Everybody will say he's a great scoring guy. He's a great athlete. I don't know that he's a fit for the Bulls because nobody ever says Carmelo is a great defender, a great passer. And I would say this. If your rep is you're a great athlete, you should be known as a great defender because great defense is strictly hustle, it's desire. And if you want to do it and you're a great athlete, you can do it. If your rep is you're a great athlete and you're strictly an offensive player, I would say, I'm not saying this is Carmelo Anthony, But my logical conclusion would be that you're maybe a little bit lazy on defense.
Yeah, that's true. One of the things that I think is intriguing about this is the fact that if you have a healthy Rose or even a semi-healthy Rose, he makes guys around him better. There was a stat here that I saw in this particular article that when Kyle Korver was with the Bulls, you know what his shooting percentage was on the floor when Rose was in the game?
Have no idea.
72%.
I don't believe it. I don't believe that he shot 72% when I don't care who was in the game. There's
when
no
Rose
way.
was in the game. Could be just one of those little factors. Who knows? Maybe maybe it's everybody keyed on Rose and they leave him open. And
I would say this, and Tom Thibodeau is actually not as sharp as I thought he was, because if I had a guy shooting 72% just because this other guy was on the floor, he'd be on the floor all the time.
He should have been on the floor all the
So
time.
I don't know if I buy
knows?
I don't know if I buy that that's the logical reason that he shot 72% at a given time in a game. And plus, who the hell? This is ridiculous. That's a stat that they kept.
Yep.
How everybody shot.
Yep.
Well, then I'd say this: if Carver was shooting 72% when Rose is in the game, then somebody must have been shooting about 6%, and that somebody else might have been shooting about 10% because
That'd be interesting.
yeah.
That'd be interesting to go back and look.
Yeah, because if he's shooting 72%, that only leaves about 28% for everybody else.
That doesn't leave much.
Doesn't leave much.
Doesn't leave much for everyone else.
Yeah.
What do you think of this whole
Free agency thing?
to-do that we've seen here about free agency
You know,
in the NBA?
my first question, Jim, is, and you really got a stack of stuff in front of you,
Well,
so you
that's
really
base-
you
that's
do some
baseball.
show prep.
That's baseball.
But I would say this: I have to think that the Players Association and the NBA might have screwed up a little bit, because the way I'm seeing this free agency, if I'm getting this right, that Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James can only make the most money if they go back to the teams that they were with, which doesn't seem like the. Now, I'm not saying, hey, I'm all for. I'm not for smaller salaries. I think a guy should be able to make what he can make. But I guess the concept would be, from the player's point of view, to be able to move and make more money if you're going to make a move. It seems to me like whatever the deal is between the NBA and the owners, the players and the owners, these guys, if they want to make more money, seem to be locked into their existing teams.
It seems to be the case, but it also seems to be. You know what? Think about the difference between free agency in the NHL and free agency in the NBA. NHL free agency opened up. Everybody was pretty much done. 48 hours. You still have a few floating out there. Martin Brodeur is still a free agent. Of course, he's 42 years old.
Yeah, Martin Brodeur is. Yeah.
And he'd be a great backup for somebody and could fit in. But the difference is, what's the NBA what does the National Hockey League have that the NBA doesn't have? They got a hard salary cap.
They have, and you're saying the NBA actually, what did they have, the luxury tax?
They have got mid-level exempt. They say, well, we have a salary cap, but you can get an exception for this, and you can get an exception for that, and screw the salary cap. If you go over it, you're just going to have to pay more money.
Yeah.
And
well, then there. Yeah.
So you're led to this. You're led to this show, these games that these guys decide to go out and play. You've got a half a dozen franchises that are playing games right now because of 4 guys.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I don't think that's anything new or unusual. I mean, put it this way: if say in the days before free agency, in whatever sport you want, but say a superstar or a big name was moved, that actually set a lot of other things in motion. So this is not really all that new. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to any of these sports. I mean, it's in a different guise. But you know what? If LeBron James, say, was playing in the days of Bob Cousy, and Wilt Chamberlain. Well, Wilt Chamberlain was traded. Okay, that set other things in motion. It had to, because when you trade a guy, or a guy of that magnitude moves, it's excuse me, puts a lot of other things in play. So that is, I don't think that's anything new or unusual.
No, but I think I'm just talking. I'm talking from a financial standpoint that eventually, and I think it was understood in the NHL, and painful as it was through the lockouts, that there had to be some sort, and it's going to happen in baseball one of these days. The gravy train is going to run out, and you're going to have to sit down and realize you've only got a limited number of dollars coming in and out, and only a limited number of dollars can go out, and you're going to have to come with a hard salary cap. You realize the top free agent on the NHL market this past free agent season here, Paul Stastny, 4 years, no drama, $28 million.
Okay, how about Peter Regan signed for 1 year for $600,000?
My guy.
But you know what? I have to say, and I love Peter Regan too, but I'm going to tell you this. I would just his name popped into my head because I was thinking, we didn't talk about this, but we must have ESP because I'm thinking about the fact that salaries are, in my mind, a little out of control, which I blame the owners for, not the players.
Exactly.
But when you say, Peter Regan, great guy to have on your team. I read, if the report is accurate, that he signed for $600 and some thousand. You're talking about a guy who's probably their fifth center, who's not going to play every game. And if you took $600,000 and just say, for the sake of talking, you spread it over the 52 weeks in the year, okay? You're talking about $10,000 to $12,000 a week for a guy who's not going to play that much. So, again, it's nothing. I'm just using him as an example because I saw his salary in the paper. When you start talking about a guy who's making, I don't know who you just used, but say $28 million over 4 years, that unless you're a big drawing card, I think the problem I see with the salaries is they're all out of line. Because unless you could really sell product or put butts in the seats, you're probably not worth it.
No, you're
but
not.
But that's not the player's fault. That's the owner's fault.
The owners have allowed it, and at least I really think the NHL took steps to become a little more responsible with it. Mm-hmm. In fact, the NFL too. You've got a salary cap.
Well, the NFL is, you really have a totally different ballgame because with the NFL, you're talking about you probably have 50-some guys under contract during the season. You might even have more.
You will have more during the course.
So you're limited right there. When you got to spread that money around between 50 to 60 guys, how much can you pay? I mean, you're forced to be a little bit more.
You have to be responsible.
Responsible is right.
Yeah. I just saw one thing here talking about the all the to-do over free agency, and we saw what the Bulls did here with Carmelo's name up on the front of the United Center and the pictures of him and everything else.
Some of this is totally stupid.
Last week's Mellow Over America tour was absolutely papal, especially when Hollywood producer Joel Silver showed him a video that illustrated why Anthony should sign with the Lakers and justify his career.
Well, when you start to get people that aren't even involved with the team. They have
no involvement in it, and that's idiotic.
I'll tell you, if I was Carmelo, though, I'd say, you know what? I'd like to see Chicago in the summertime and spend a day or two there and hit some of the nice places. And I'll go down to Houston and Dallas and see, be wine and dine there and out to L.A. You better believe I would do the same thing.
And then I'll come back and say, Phil, what are you going to give me?
Exactly. It's called negotiations. It's called, that's part of the whole deal. And I'll tell you what. I know that Colley referred to Carmelo in his article as selfish because I think his reference was.
I think he's long had that reputation.
Oh, okay. He was referring, I think, to the fact that he may go to New York and sign for more money. I'm going to tell you this, I'll just throw out numbers, and they're not obviously accurate. But if I'm Carmelo or anybody else, and I'm making $15 million. And I'm a millionaire. Yeah, I'm well off. There's no question. But you think I'm going to take a $5 million pay cut just to come to Chicago to have the opportunity to play here with the Bulls and maybe win a championship? You got to be out of your mind. I'm not taking a 1/3 pay cut for anybody. And I don't. That doesn't mean I'm selfish. That means, you know what? I'm a poor kid. I probably grew up poor. Didn't probably have nothing but a basketball and some gym shoes. And now you want me to take a pay cut? Why should I take a pay cut just to come to Chicago or Dallas or Houston or New York? That's ridiculous. And I don't think it's selfish. I think it's just that's human nature. There's some guys who might.
I was
do
talking
it.
about selfish in the terms of his court presence.
Yeah, but I'm talking about what the selfish part of him being referred to in the article was. And you know what? Here's another thing. Going back to Cowley, which was my original burr in the saddle. There's a guy you've been touting to come to Chicago, but at the end of your column saying what a dope Derrick Rose is for not recruiting, you're saying that he's selfish. So how good of a fit is this guy going to be? You're a total moron if you're Cowley.
You know, and somebody else referred to him that I saw an article. I think they were contrasting how the Bulls run their business and the Cubs run their business. Right now, the fact that the Cubs have been very transparent about everything they've done. And you've got Derrick Rose, who's basically, I don't know what he does. He just kind of wanders around.
Well, he's a professional basketball player.
And
he likes
that's
to
what
keep
he
to
should do.
himself, and that's what he does.
And
he makes a
that's
few
what I think he
commercials,
should do.
plays some basketball.
And
He says he likes to listen to his music. And what Cowley really seemed to be mad about in the article is that Derrick Rose, I don't think, reads Joe Cowley's column to find out, how the Bulls should be run.
Joe Cowley has been lost since Ozzie Guillen left town because that was
That was his man.
that was his guy. So.
That's his guy. So
he really.
all right, I didn't know that was his guy.
That's it. I think two people have annoyed me the most. I mean, Cowley with his hanging on and seeing tweets and Facebook postings from Chet Kopic trying to still make himself relevant.
I like Chet Kopic. I mean, he'll say he's like the circus con man, or he's the
he's still
circus
a con
guy.
man.
So he's
still the
Chet
con man.
Kopic is totally in.
He's
in character all the way.
He's got a book coming out too.
I love that. I'll read it.
I'd
I'd like to hear what Chet Kopic has to say.
I mean, he did one a few years ago called "Fat Guys Shouldn't Dance at Halftime." It was actually pretty funny.
Back in the 80s, Jim, for a while, I think that when the WWF came and they started to have shows at the Horizon, the then Horizon, they didn't have a permanent ring announcing presence here. So Kopic did it for a while, and he always at the end the call was, and so would win with the body press. And I was like, I haven't heard that term, but they used to use that back when we were kids in the 60s. That was when you pinned a guy, that was the body press. And you're like, wow, that's a blast from the past.
Oh, yeah.
So, what do you want to talk baseball-wise?
I like Chet.
Chet's a great guy.
He's funny, but he's still trying to make himself.
John wants to say
He's
something.
trying to make himself
I met him many times.
You did? Okay.
Oh, yeah. He used to come up to WJJG, up to our studios up there, and do sports programs up there.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I met him many times up at the studios.
Friend of mine worked when he was a kid. Worked at Channel 5 when Kopic was there, and it was funny. Arthur was doing a game at Loyola, and I think he wasn't the official scorer, but he was doing all the scoring and the play-by-play for whoever had it on TV, probably Comcast. And I was just down there and I was spotting for him. Gave me a free meal on a Friday night, And Kopic comes in with his son, and it's halftime, and we're just standing there waiting, and he said, have you ever met Chet? I said, no. So we go up into the stands, and as we're walking up there, Kopic begins to go into his Kopic. Arturo, mi amigo.
Yeah.
He says, Chet, friend of mine, Jim Leon. He says, Jaime, any amigo of Arturo is an amigo of mine.
He's a goof.
Okay, now when you said they used to do the pickups for television, was that at Loyola?
Yeah. When Joe I'd see Joe sitting across.
Okay, yeah. I was sitting next to him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'd see Joe.
That was Lakeside that picked up the coverage.
Okay, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
I didn't even know who was covering it that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I used to see Joe, and Joe would always say hello.
Yep, and I
Yeah.
used to drive him there.
Yeah, Joe would always say hello.
Jim, turn. I know you're turning to the Cubs, but turn back to Carmelo for 1 second because there's one other point I'd like to make.
This is today's article, not whatever you.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say it says I'm reading the headline from Collie. It says Carmelo slow to make a call, and I guess the inference is that he should be quicker on doing whatever he's supposed to do. I'd say this: if you're a person that's ready to make a decision that involves millions of dollars, why does that have to be quick, and why is that not? And I'm assuming that he's sort of maybe on Carmelo's case because Carmelo can't make his mind up quick enough. But again, you're making a decision that's affecting your life to the tune of millions of dollars. Why would you be making a quick decision on that?
Well, the inference in the article is it all has to do again with LeBron James, because you're still waiting for James to make his call.
Because what? He's going to set the market? I guess. I suppose.
He's going to set the market, and he's going to be able to set availability.
But the Knicks
because
only
if
have
he
so
goes
much
back,
that they can actually afford to give you.
If he goes back to Miami,
yeah,
there's nothing left for Carmelo. Now, yesterday Miami signed Josh McRoberts and Danny Granger. So, I
didn't know Danny Granger was still in the league.
That surprised me, too, when I saw that.
And Josh McRoberts, yeah, okay. I know that name. I don't know much about him.
Yeah, we got to start following the NBA
I think
closer.
a little bit more, yeah. But, Jim, go ahead. Go to baseball. And I know you got a lot of baseball stuff that you want to cover.
Oh, my gosh. What should we talk about?
I'm telling you, I'm going to talk about, and I've knocked Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer plenty on this show. But I told you during the week that I think this latest trade is an excellent trade. Not so much because, we lost major league pitching talent. But here's what I'm beginning to see.
You lost major league pitching talent that you were only going to control to the end of the year, and the other one you were only going to control to the following year.
Well, the other thing, I think on Samardzija, the big thing is, this is typical Cubs, I'll say this, Cubs fandom is right in line with Cubs management most of the time. When they fall in love with a player based on what they do for 10 games or half a season or one season. And Jeff Samardzija, to be honest, would you like to have been able to keep Jeff Samardzija? I think you would. But the reality is you could not keep him at what he was at his asking price.
Oh, no.
Because he has not had the proven track record.
He hasn't proved
to have
himself.
the asking price that he has.
He hasn't proved himself to be worth 5 years at $85 million.
No, not at all. And you know what? 10 or 12 good games at the beginning of a season does not make you worthy of that type of salary. So the Cubs definitely, at those prices, Samardzija they had to get rid of. And here's what I'm going to say. I think that the trade is great for one reason. You bring in not just Addison Russell, and it gives you really great depth at the shortstop position, which means that when you deal, if you deal Castro or Baez or Russell, any of the three of them, you're dealing from strength. The other organizations know it, and you can now get a very, you can ask a high price for these guys. The other thing is we got a young guy named Billy McKinney. I don't know how he'll turn out, but he's a 19-year-old left-handed hitting outfielder. But you're going to add to your minor league depth with Almora, Soler. Now you have McKinney. So you're adding to the depth of your organization, which is a good thing.
You have created more currency.
Exactly.
To deal for pitching.
Exactly.
At some point in time.
Right.
2014 we're sellers.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 2015, maybe not. 2016, we can be a buyer.
I saw somebody in the paper the other day said 2017, the Cubs will be a contender. Now, I said when we did the remote at Fannie and Schmoes, I called 2018, but I could get on board with 2017.
Easily. In fact, there was a great article, and I didn't bring it along. I saw it, Sports Illustrated, a couple of weeks ago, talking about Houston. You want to take a break, John? You're looking at me with that quizzical look. And I was looking at the clock. Okay. Talking about how Houston has rebuilt their farm system and the prospects that they're starting to see. Mm-hmm. And you could liken it to the Cubs in the way they've done it. And they're saying, well, the 2017 World Series could be very easily Houston and Chicago.
Well, I don't know about that, but that'd be nice to see the Cubs in the World Series. I have to say, this sort of reminded me. This trade made me start to think about guys like Branch Rickey, who were big on the farm systems. The Yankees at one time had a really deep farm system. The Cardinals, obviously, I think, still have a good farm system. And I think when you have that, and you have again, you like as you put it, Jim, you have currency. Then you have people who want those players. Now you have a reputation as a strong organization. So what the Dodgers did, John, for years is they would take players that were prospects, and they were able to see those players up close throughout the year because they were on teams in their organization. They saw them in spring training. And I'm not saying they were bad players, but they were not maybe up to the level of the guys they wanted to keep, but they were still good currency, and they would trade those guys and get very good already major league ready players, guys who were into majors, who were going to fill in as pieces on their contending or championship teams. And this is what the Cubs, I'm beginning to see the light. This is what they're starting to do.
This is what they're starting to do. Should we take a break? Yes, I guess the answer to that is yes.
There we go.
You are listening to Armchair Experts on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network from the John DeVita Broadcast Center. And now, back to Jim and Rich and Armchair Experts.
And we're back. I forgot the thought.
You wanted to talk about the World Cup.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the World Cup.
I thought you were going to jump right into the
World Cup. I wanted to talk about the World Cup.
No, I don't think so.
either. It's interesting because everybody, I have never really heard such chatter and such talk about a trade involving minor leaguers that has built such an excitement. Of course, then again, it might just be because baseball has been down the last few years in this town so much. But I think people are starting to see what's being built.
Yeah, I think so.
What's being built here. And it was kind of interesting, too, because prior to all this, somebody posted a blogger in the Cubs Den, talked about an analysis and what the Cubs have gotten in some of their trades. Recently. The Matt Garza deal brought C.J. Edwards, Justin Grimm, Neil Ramirez, and Mike Holt.
Ouch.
Edwards and Holt have been sort of a mixed bag, and really Holt's not going to be a contributor, but Neil Ramirez has been really nasty coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah, Neil Ramirez has been good, I guess.
Edwards has a chance to be a good starter, but I think
he's on the DL. He's having some problems with his arm.
He's having some problems. Grimm has pitched well. Travis Wood for Sean Marshall. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, that was good.
That one turned out to be...
That was all right.
Sean Marshall, you made the comment here about Cub fans falling in love with someone for a limited number of things here. The blogger, Cubs, this comes out of Cubs Den. He said, and I love the term he used, when the Cubs took a flyer on Travis Wood for the oddly beloved setup man, Sean Marshall. Again, a case of Cub fans falling in love with somebody that you don't really understand why. Rizzo for Cashner. That's been pretty much a win for both sides, although Cashner has been injured this year. Now, Scott Feldman, what did we get? Arrieta, Strope.
Yeah, Arrieta
and slot money for the international draft, and they acquired some talent.
That's what you need, some slot money.
You need slot money for that. You need slot money for that.
Otherwise, you can't play those machines.
That's right. You got to do that, and you throw money in, and you wind up with somebody like Gleyber Torres, Eloy Jimenez, and Jefferson Mejia, along with Jen Ho Seng. And
Jen Ho Seng?
Yes. I got to look this guy up because this guy's saying he might end up as the Cubs' best pitching prospect by the end of the year.
Is he related to Kai Igawa?
It could be.
Yeah.
And I did not realize we got somebody named Corey Black for Alfonso Soriano.
Corey Black. What's he doing?
I have
What's
no
he,
idea.
Who is he?
And by the way, Alfonso Soriano was DFA.
Yeah, I saw. He's released.
Yeah.
You didn't realize that Alfonso Soriano, when he was with the Yankees the first time, had one year hit 39 homers, which was the most for a second baseman in forever. And, you know what?
Sandberg hit 40.
Pardon me?
Sandberg hit 40.
Sandberg hit 40, but at the time, Soriano, I think...
Sandberg hit 40 before Soriano hit 39.
Okay, then Soriano
might
was
be the American League.
Might be the American League deal. So, at any rate, Soriano. I don't want to get onto Soriano.
Go ahead, get on to Soriano.
No, I mean Soriano was I think was a good ball player. He's one of those guys that I believe it would be the same as you hear people always moan about Carlos Boozer. Well, Carlos Boozer did not, twist the Bulls' arms to pay him more than what he would generally be thought to be worth, and neither did Soriano. But as far as those guys go, I don't think that you can, when somebody offers you that money, why the heck are you going to pass it up? I remember Tom Hicks.
Think if somebody offered us $1.5 million to do morning radio in Chicago, we'd.
I think we'd take it.
You think we'd take it?
I think we'd split it. I'd take half of it. Why not?
We bring John along.
John, you could have part of mine too.
We'll bring John along.
Jim and I will both split part of it. We'll do it 3 ways. So 1.5 divided by 3.
Yeah.
We'd be in good shape.
We'll bring John along.
We'll do a package deal.
That's right. They got to have us all.
Yep.
That's right.
But what else did you want to say about the Cubs? I see you
I don't know.
All kinds. He's got the color printouts and he's got all this stuff.
Yeah, and I also look at this and I go, geez, I had to clean the print heads. I couldn't read half this stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
Jeez. It's kind of interesting. Now, I'm seeing articles already. I'm seeing comments. Oh, Addison Russell could be the starting shortstop for the Cubs next season.
Could be.
Yeah, very possible. And it's interesting because in this one particular article that came off of the Comcast CSN Chicago site, Castro is very accepting of whatever winds up happening to him.
Yeah, I know. He's world soccer gear.
He understands.
Jeez.
Oh, wow.
I'm looking at the front of Jim's printout.
Jeez.
He's got world soccer gear on there,
well,
Jim. John, I know he wants to talk about soccer.
Somebody
it's eating at him. He can't wait.
He
wants to talk about Neymar. And Fred.
Isn't that Fred?
Fred. They have Brazil has they have a guy on their team that only goes by the name Fred. How do you like that?
You have Neymar and you have Fred?
Yeah, Fred. I was reading an article about Brazil. Most of their guys, I think they're all wanted because none of them will use their full name. They all go in by last names or first names. So, I said, what are these guys? There's a reason that they're playing those games in the jungle, Jim. Those guys are wanted, and they want to stay as far away from authority as possible.
That must be the reason.
God almighty.
It's just getting back to this. It's interesting that Castro is already kind of accepting whatever happens. They want me to play in a different position, I'll play in a different position.
Mm-hmm.
They want to trade me, I understand that. This is business. In fact, he made the comment here, he said,
business.
I got a lot of great talent. They know what they're doing.
Yeah. I think they actually, I'm beginning to get the feeling that they might actually know what they're doing. Well, I have to say, Jim, you talked a couple of minutes ago about the trades and some of the ones that have been good and guys that have come over and sort of worked out. I would say this, even when they picked up fringe guys, they were useful guys. Now, they might not be as useful
They were good
with a last-place team.
They were fillers.
But they were good fillers, and they probably would be valuable pieces. No, well, let's look at this. They're talking about Justin Ruggiano possibly being a guy that they'll trade before the deadline or at the deadline.
I'm surprised Sherholtz is still here, too.
Now, Ruggiano would be a good example of a guy, not a star, but a guy that maybe a contending team can find useful. As the pennant race develops and we get from July into August. Schierholtz is another good example. He's not having a stellar year personally, but he's a guy that a team is probably going to want at the trade deadline again to fill an outfield spot, to be a left-handed bat, maybe come off the bench. So they've done a really good job, and they've had some guys that are reclamation projects that are position players I like. Chris Coghlan, I didn't realize, was actually the rookie of the year his first year, ran into some injury problems. They have him. I don't think that he's a guy that...
I think he went 4 for 5 last night, too.
Well, I mean, he's a guy who may still have an upside. He may fit into the picture down the road. Ryan Kalish, who's currently in Iowa, I think there was a guy, you probably get a guy like that on the cheap, but he's worth taking a look at. So I think they've done a good job in doing that type of thing.
I think they have, too.
Yeah.
And I mean, right now, you look at this. Russell's at Tennessee. So, right now the Cubs, from the top 100 heading into the season, they have 3 of the top 14 players.
That's what they say.
6 out of the top 41 and 8 overall.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a commodity to be accumulating here.
Well, what is the name of the kid that we drafted first this year, the catcher?
Schwarber.
Schwarber.
And I got to get
to say Shackner, but Schwarber. Schwarber. I read. I mean, and he's doing well.
Yeah.
And the other thing that is interesting, that they have a kid whose name I cannot remember now, that was already catching at Kane County. That's a very solid prospect. So again, there's the idea of depth. You think about a guy like Vogelbach, who's at I think he's still at, is he with Kane County, or did he move up?
I think he moved up.
So we're starting to see some depth.
But I have to find out. I have to find out what happened. I haven't checked. Find out what happened to my guy Rock Shoulders.
Rock Shoulders is probably still there. I think it's an interesting thing that probably one of our weaker spots, second base. They're talking about maybe Alcantara coming up before the season is over.
Mm-hmm.
And he made the PCL All-Star team and is having a really good year. Blake Parker made the PCL All-Star team, just got recalled by the Cubs. And Wada, who's, the only thing about Wada, who the Japanese pitcher, I think he's already in his 30s. He made the PCL All-Star team.
Yeah, he did.
But I think that he's already somewhere in his 30s, and so he's not at least a long-term solution to anything. But again, I think they've done, now I'm beginning to see where their plan is starting to come to fruition, because you're beginning to see some depth in that farm system.
And that's important.
That's really important.
That's important because the philosophy, and it's been very clear from the beginning, and it's not, it's build from within. Build from within to have the talent, have a steady flow of talent.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's time for them, and who's ever in that position there, maybe they're at the end of the period of control and they want to move on, we have somebody to fill in. We need to deal for something that we have a weakness. We have the chips in the minor league system to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I mean, they traded when they did this deal with Oakland. They traded with a good partner, because you had Oakland, who is a small market team and draft smart.
Yeah.
And you know what? I mean, it'll be curious to see as the Cubs progress up, and we're not picking up the top prospect or the fifth prospect or whatever. How smart are they going to be when they're drafting in the middle of the pack or at the end of the pack?
Actually, you're probably being how stupid is everybody else going to be, because it's not. I think
that can be the case too. That can be the case too.
I got to be honest with you. I'm reading Pinstripe Empire, which is a really great by Marty Apple. It's a really great history of the Yankees, and obviously the Yankees, for any baseball organization, would be somebody you want to model yourselves after, over the course of the years. But the thing about drafting is, I just read he goes a little bit into Brian Taylor, who was the number one
number
draft
one pick.
and never made it.
Never
But
made it.
What I didn't realize is that Brian Taylor actually had solid years in the minors, and his career was pretty much derailed when he got into a fight in the offseason defending his brother and separated or dislocated his left shoulder, and he was never the same again. So he probably actually looked like he was on track to make it. But I guess the point I would make is that I don't care which organization you point to, you're going to have some really good draft picks, guys you maybe draft lower who are going to turn out to be major leaguers, and you're going to have guys who are drafted high that are going to be bust outs. And I don't care if you put whatever the name you put to the organization, Cubs, A's, Yankees, Dodgers, Cardinals, it's going to happen to all of them. It's just the nature of the beast. And it doesn't matter what sport you're talking about. You're going to have some guys that pan out and some that don't, and there's going to be a variety of reasons for the success and failure of all of them.
It's interesting, too, and I'm just looking at the quote. It made me think of this the other day when you started to think about, you got a guy at shortstop, you draft another shortstop, or you trade for another shortstop. You got a guy named Baez down there who's played shortstop. You got Alcantara who's played from shortstop. Epstein had a quote in here. He said, "You can never have too many shortstops. They end up all over the field." In other words, they're versatile players.
Well, the other thing is,
and it's hard.
You're talking about a really key position,
and you're talking about a key position. It's hard to find one, and it's hard to find a good one.
Yep.
And if you find a good one, there's guys that can go anywhere because of the range and because of the skills they develop playing that position. All right, I'll give you one great example, Mr. Cub. Pretty doggone good first baseman.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Well, no, a good shortstop probably could play all over the field.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But my feeling is I don't think that that's necessarily their game plan. I think that the game plan right now is maybe to, as the papers use the term, flip some of these guys to get major league pitching. And I think that's well, and whatever the plan is, whether it's to have these guys play other positions, although I don't really see with what the other guys who are being mentioned as prospects in the system, I don't see them flipping these guys or putting them in other spots. You got Bryant, who's probably going to be a third baseman. You got Alcantara, who's probably going to be a second baseman. You've got a number of guys who are outfield prospects.
Almora is probably going to be your center fielder.
So,
he's having a tough season, but he's kind of I read something. Somebody's kind of liking it to the season Castro had last year, where he's got to kind of find himself and get himself on the right track. They view Schwarber as maybe a corner outfielder.
Yeah, well,
At some
put it
point
this
in time.
way: if you have a good, solid catcher that can hit, I'd say keep him as a catcher.
I would hope so too, but you've also got the issue. Castro's been adequate. Or Castillo, rather.
Yeah, he is very good. I think he's good. I mean, I don't think he's going to be as good as this kid. My prediction would be that this kid Schwarber is going to be the real deal.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he's, but Castillo, yeah, he can hold that seat for 2-3 more years, whatever it's going to take. He's more than adequate.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think's going to happen on the south side?
Well, I'll tell you what. I love. We sort of laughed. I think both of us laughed when somebody in the papers made a prediction that Abreu could possibly lead the league in home runs in his first year. But even if he doesn't, he's going to be right up there. Doesn't mean that, and I would say the same thing goes for Jake Arrieta here. A part of a season does not make you, doesn't make a career for you. But I'll tell you what, I like Abreu. I like the things he says in the paper. I like the fact that he's putting the team first. He's sort of wavering. I don't know. They'll probably end up talking him into this home run derby contest. But I like where he's coming from in the sense that, you know what, I don't want anything to throw my timing off for the regular season. And the home run derby has the potential to do that. The other thing is, when he was asked yesterday...
And he's been named to the All-Star team, too.
When he was asked yesterday about that very thing, about being named to the All-Star team. He said, "You know what? We have 5 or 10 games or whatever it is before the All-Star break. I'm worried about those. I'm not worried about the All-Star game," which is exactly the attitude that you need to have. The other thing I love about him is he consistently shows his faith. He thanks God for everything that he does, and I think that is,
I think that's
we all
wonderful.
should be doing that.
That's
And
why
I'm
we
glad
all-
to see that he does that.
That's what we all should be doing.
Definitely.
If you're interested what the Cubs lineup is for Game 1 versus the Reds today, Coughlin in left, rather. Sweeney in center, Rizzo at first, Castro at short, Valbuena at third, Scherholz in right, Baker the catcher, Barney at second.
Wow.
And
How many
Wood-
guys under 200 do you have in that lineup?
And Wood is the pitcher.
Well, Wood brings at least the average up. a little bit.
Yeah.
He's hitting 260 or something like
Yeah,
that.
no kidding.
But no, I tell you what, I like what's happening on the south side. I think they got hurt a little bit by the fact that by the fact that Nate Jones,
Thank you, Mr. DeVita.
I think
You
is
kind
out
man, you.
for the year,
Yeah.
and
think
Matt
so.
Lindstrom has been on the disabled list. So I think the Sox would be contending if they hadn't got so hurt so badly in the bullpen with some injuries.
And I think
I think they really are still sort of contending.
And I think with Avi Garcia getting hurt early in the year, that had some sort of an impact.
Yeah, I think they really
Two.
had a pretty nice team put together.
They had a decent team put together. It's kind of interesting too, because I went on to Fangraphs after I looked at a rather lengthy article about the Cub and Athletic trade, and kind of looked at what Fangraphs projections are for the rest of the year. They've got they're projecting right now, and I guess I'd have to go in and look a little more on how they're basing this, but they're projecting the White Sox to finish off the year at 75-87, which is 6 games better than last year.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll, and I kind of thought early on, they might kind of take a run at being run at a wild card, but fall back, and they're projecting them at 4th. Right now, Fangraphs is projecting the Cubs at 72-90, which is a number that I wouldn't have been surprised at the beginning of the year.
If you look at the Sox, though, I think the key thing for the Sox, I look at even though it's not sabermetrically probably correct.
Or
I looked at the
politically
batting averages of the players who play every day, in the box score.
Which is what you should do.
And what I have been noticing is that I think Abreu, for the Sox to have any chance to maybe be a contender or even hit the numbers that you're quoting in Fangraph, Abreu needs to keep up the performance that he's having, and he's the key guy, because what I see is that even with their good starts, now Connor Gillespie and Alexei Ramirez, their averages are dropping, and which is not to knock them, but they're going to probably reach the level that they normally would be at. So where Ramirez and Gillespie and Abreu were probably sort of holding the offense up, and I guess I'd throw Eaton in there as well. It's going to probably be up to Eaton and Abreu to maintain what they're doing, because Ramirez and Gillespie, I think, are going to fall to what they normally would.
They'll
would be
fall
at.
back to their norm. Ramirez, I think, is a name I've heard bandied about in trade talks. Seattle is supposed to be interested in Viciedo.
Yes.
They're also, and on the other side of that, Seattle would be willing to trade Brandon Maurer and another player from Viciedo.
Yeah, who's Brandon Maurer?
He's a relief pitcher.
Oh, okay.
And Viciedo has also gotten some interest in San Francisco. From San Francisco, Seattle last month, Seattle was also said to be interested in Ramirez and Dunn.
Who is
Seattle.
Seattle. Well,
And
what?
the
though?
Yankees
I could
and
buy
the-
Ramirez. I don't know about Dunn, because
Yeah, I
did
don't-
you see the other day when the Sox played Seattle, and I think Chris, I don't know if it was Sale, Quintana, or one of those two pitched. Lloyd McClendon had 7 lefties in the lineup against a left-handed pitcher, and the press asked him about it. He said, "Well, you know what? I thought those guys would fare just as well against the lefty as any right-handed hitters I have." So obviously, when you hear guys like Castro, Ramirez, Viciedo, when their names are mentioned as possibly going to Seattle, I would say there's probably strong interest on the part of Seattle. I'm not sure if the Cubs or Sox have as strong an interest, but I'm sure they're listening. And but obviously Seattle could use. Now I'll say this: if you had 7 right-handed hitters in your lineup, it's not as bad. I think in my mind anyway, lefties don't match up as well against lefties as righties match up against righties. So when you're 2 left-handed in your lineup, I think you need that balance. If you're 2 right-handed, I don't think it's as critical.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when I see them starting 7 lefties against a very good pitcher like Chris Sale, they're in need of right-handed hitting.
Yeah. I was just taking a fast glance down here. Any interesting Twitter feeds that indicate, because last time we were doing this, we missed breaking the LeBron James, opting out of his contract.
I do know that the Mariners just sent Justin Smoke, who's been with them for 2 or 3 years, and a prospect / suspect, because I don't think he's ever really hit much at the major league level. He's showed flashes enough to keep them interested, but they just sent him to the minors. So it is possible that maybe they would seriously think about a trade involving Adam Dunn and Ramirez. But then you're talking about expanding that trade. You'd have to get a lot more than 1 relief pitcher.
You need
back.
to. You need to get some. You need to get more back on that. Interesting too. The Yankees have also been scouting John Danks, and at least as of this article's writing, which was the 4th of July, Danks had pitched well over his last 8 starts. He's actually pitched pretty decently this year, but over his last 8 starts, he was 4-2 with a 2.65 ERA.
Well, John, Danks has had his ups and downs. I always am I'm a fan of John Danks because I think he's a pitcher as opposed to a thrower.
Exactly.
And but when you are a guy that doesn't have the super great stuff, you need to have control, location, and if you don't have it, you're going to get roughed up.
Yeah.
John Danks falls into that category and occasionally has rough patches, but I would say I would always, as a manager, I would never mind seeing John Danks go to the mound. I think he's going to give you everything he's got.
He's going to give you He's going to give you a solid performance.
And I think with Joe Girardi as the manager of the Yankees, I believe that they would have some interest in a guy like John Danks.
I think they would. The Yankees are struggling a little bit this year. Third place in the East. And I don't think they're gonna. I think it's going to be another year without the playoffs.
I think that they're trying to accommodate Derek Jeter in his last year, and I don't know how well Derek's playing, but he's holding a spot that somebody else is going to have next year. I don't think they've really adequately replaced Alex Rodriguez. You've got Jacoby Ellsbury that came over from Boston. I'm sure he's playing well. I know Brian McCann, I think, got off to a slow start, but I don't know if he's righted his ship. I haven't heard a whole lot about the Yankees. I don't know who's doing well and who's not. I know CC Sabathia is out for the year now officially.
Yeah.
So that's a big hole in their pitching staff. I would say this. I think Joe Girardi is a real headsy manager, and he will make the best out of what he's got. But I don't think the Yankees have overwhelming talent to throw at the situation.
I think
also lost Robinson Cano, which they're still trying to make up for.
Right. I think Girardi always makes the most of what he's given. I think the best case example was when he was managing the Marlins that one year.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that was a guy who did really, really well. A couple of other things. I think I mentioned this, and I shared a text with you when I saw it the other day about the passing of Jim Brosnan, who pitched in the 50s and 60s and became better known as an author.
Mm-hmm. Jim
Later.
Brosnan, yeah.
Yeah, it was
former Cub, former White Sox, former Cincinnati Red.
Yeah.
And I think he probably played with other teams, but they don't
in major leagues, he played with the Cardinals.
Yeah,
played
Cardinals.
with the Cubs.
Yeah.
Played with the Reds. Played with the White Sox.
Yeah.
Always remember the quote that when he was with the Cubs, Jimmy Enright hated him. Jimmy Enright was a sports writer for the American, I think, in those days, and just absolutely hated him, and Brosnan hated him back.
Mm-hmm.
He was always critical of him, and he made some comment one day on there when Brosnan got sent down to the minors. Was the Cubs sent Jim Brosnan? Houston was the AAA team at that time. Brosnan got sent back to Houston for his own health. Every time he stuck his head out of the dugout, somebody hit a line drive at it.
Okay.
And he said it was very interesting that in the quote that when he came to Chicago, when he was traded to the White Sox, Eddie Short, who was the general manager, met him at the airport, and the first words out of Short's mouth were, "You bet you don't do any writing while you're here."
Oh, really?
Yeah, not hello, how are you? We're glad to help you. Don't do any writing while you're here.
Well, I know that was controversial that he wrote about the teams that he was, or the Reds, I think, when he was with them.
And the first book that he wrote, he started the season with the Cardinals.
Okay.
And then got traded in the middle of the year.
Was he with the Reds in '61
Yeah.
when they faced the Yankees in the
and
series?
That was the whole thing with the pennant race book.
The pennant race, yeah.
Which was one of the best.
I thought that was a great book. I know for sure I wrote that. I not wrote it, read that book, and
You might have
it was
wrote
a
in it at some point.
Really good book. I didn't see anything. I don't remember anything. It's not
If
like
you
Ball
find-
4 where there's things I could think of that were controversial. That
There was
Boughton wrote.
nothing I don't really think, if you look at it nowadays, there was anything terribly controversial about it. But you were getting a look at the inside of a ball club during a pennant race.
Yeah,
The comments,
yeah.
you know,
I guess, yeah.
and
The old,
his feelings after a bad outing,
yeah.
you know.
Well, I John, I know that you're thinking that why the heck is Jim not bringing up the World Cup, and I that's my thoughts too, because I know that Jim is a World Cup aficionado, and he probably loves talking soccer.
I think
So
we're
I
going to
can't
say,
believe
you know what?
that he's.
I think we're
and
going to save that for our next show when we'll do a whole wrap-up.
a whole wrap
of
up
the
of 1
World
minute
Cup.
of the World Cup.
We'll do a whole wrap-up.
Could you believe? You know what? These guys. I'll tell you what. The World Cup
And
people
what- and you know what,
are
we're
so
gonna-
dishonest. Now this thing was supposed to take 2 weeks. They're not ending the thing
No,
till
3.
Sunday. It's taken like 3 weeks.
No, it was supposed to be 3 weeks.
That's not right.
You were going to say
They
something
said 2
else.
weeks.
You were going to say something
2
else.
weeks.
weren't
They're
you?
lying even about that.
John was going to run. John was going to run the church there in a minute.
If the
said
guys who run soccer, they could seamlessly take over the World Wrestling Entertainment enterprise, because to me, there's not much difference.
I don't think so either. But I want to find out. I'm going to have to.
Don't think so either.
I'm going to have to find out.
Cogent
more.
comments from Mr. Leon.
Well, you know what? I mean, I'm going to have to go back, and I'm going to have to find out more about Fred.
Please do. Don't say that when I got coffee in my mouth.
Because I don't know how I missed.
How did you
Fred.
miss Fred? Huh? Good old Fred. All right.
Hey, I got one last thing here, and then John will leave. We'll go quietly. And made me think of this. I'm glad I pulled this out, because the Sox are going to play Boston, to play Boston, and an ex-Sox player, guy who I always was one of my favorites, was with Boston now, A.J. Pierzynski.
Great guy.
You know, and he got it early in June. There was kind of an article here about ejections being on the rise this year in baseball, and we were not even going to get into that one here now. But AJ got tossed early in June for a comment he made to an umpire. He said, "Few players know how to get a reaction from his peers, the fans, and the umpires, quite like Boston Red Sox catcher A.J. Pierzynski." This is off of Yahoo from an article by Mark Townsend. He said he's like the classic pro wrestling villain. Even though you know it's part of his shtick, he knows what buttons to push and when to push them to get under your skin. He's a master at it, but that isn't really surprising considering Pierzynski grew up watching men like Nature Boy Ric Flair and Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Those are experts.
According to MLB's .com's Anthony Castrovince, Brzezinski's heel-like tendencies haven't faded as he's grown older. In fact, during a game against the Cleveland Indians on June 4th, it led directly to an ejection. After Cleveland's Asdrubal Cabrera drew a walk, which Brzezinski obviously didn't agree with, he suddenly jabbed home plate umpire Quinn Walcott with an insult akin to Piper's dreaded double eye poke. A.J. Brzezinski turned around and told the umpire, "Give me a new ball, one you can see."
Yeah, that's what I like.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that one.
One you can
And
see.
he got tossed.
Well, that happens.
He got tossed.
That happens.
You know.
AJ, we love him.
I
hope he stays forever. I love
know.
AJ Brzezinski.
John, put the music on. I've run out of things to talk about. I'm sure Massaro's
I
got
didn't.
more. He wants to talk about Fred and Neymar and hoo-ha and any of the
Oh, he even
others.
knows how to say Neymar's name. Neymar.
Neymar? Isn't that the way it is?
I don't know. I say Neymar, but it could be Neymar.
It could be Neymar. All right.
John is playing the music
John's
louder.
playing the
like,
music.
okay,
He's turning
I've
the
heard enough of
music
this
up.
stuff.
That's enough. All right. Thanks for listening. We are out of here.
John, you are the best.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John DeVita. Our audio engineer is James Rohde, and the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network is Mr. John Shikanda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, July the 8th, the year 2014. Until next time, be safe, and thanks for listening.